Are you right? There you go.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Cheltenham Borough Council Audit, Compliance and Governance Committee meeting, being held today, Wednesday, the 28th of January. My name is Councillor Adrian Bamford, and I am the chair of the committee. This meeting is being recorded by the council and live streamed on its YouTube channel. If there are any breaks in transmission to the YouTube stream, the meeting will be adjourned for a short period until the issue is resolved. Can I ask officers to introduce themselves when they speak, and everyone to be sure to use the microphones and speak clearly when addressing the meeting? Apologies. Duncan has apologised, I know. Don't know, is that it? Yeah. Would anybody like to declare an interest in any of the items? I think this is just in the open session, isn't it? So when we come to the exempt session, then maybe other considerations. So this is just with respect to the open items. Nothing? Okay, let's move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. And first of all, just to consider the accuracy of those minutes. If anybody's got any points on accuracy, could you raise those now? I've got a couple of very minor. Oh, sorry.
It's just a minor one, and it's probably fine. It's not. Is what's recorded in these open minutes to do with item 11, recharging mechanisms, and section 20 process? I just wonder if that would be better just cross-referring to the exempt minutes, because I mean, I to be honest, I don't remember approving any recommendations in that item. So what's written there doesn't quite tie in with my recollection, but I'm just wondering whether cross-referring it to the exempt minutes would actually be more appropriate in any case. So it's a very final bit of the minutes, which is number 11. So it's on page 11, very bottom of page 11, item 11.
So it just needs to say members consider the report.
Sorry, so could we delete "and voted to approve the recommendations"? That's a very final sentence on page 11. And I'm going to put a line through that, so the pen won't work. Yeah. I deleted two words which I think are just have strayed in there. One is on page 10, is partially compliant in how it is auditing two councils. Well, I think with this, there shouldn't be a two there, so I just crossed that out in signing. And there was one other word that oh yes, on top of page 9, the fraud response plan is a quite reference guide. I think I've just deleted quite. It's a reference guide for all staff. So I've signed those off, and I can pass those over as signed, which I will do in just a second. If I can have, first of all, if we could vote on that, if we're happy that they are now an accurate reflection, if you could show by raising your hand. You weren't here, Julian. Okay, that's anyway. We got enough, I think. There, 5 of us. That's enough to approve those minutes. And we're going to now talk about some matters that were arising from those. And first of all, there's a number on page 7, which is Lucy's report. And do you want to comment on those now? To say, because in the minute it at the end of the paragraph it says action. Can you see that? If you want to say what that action was and how it's been followed through, would that be Okay.
Happy to, Chair. Evening, members. So the actions that were against myself for the last meeting of this committee were to send a full copy of the data maturity audit report, which I have done. And there are a couple of questions in respect to the void process report and also the disaster recovery report. I did, apologies, I sent it late, but I did send an email through either Monday afternoon, hopefully to respond to all of those points and actions, but happy to take any further questions.
That covers all three of those actions that we noted at the last meeting. So has any member got any other point on those? No? Good, right. There was one other matter arising that I noted on page... Oh, yes. On point 7 on page 10, there's five points there, following 5 questions. Somehow we need to record the responses to those somewhere, somehow. I'm not quite sure what the best way of doing that is, to be honest. We can't just leave the questions as they're questions really in the minutes, I don't think. So what's the best way to proceed? Let's, for the purposes of this meeting, we'll say that we are going to ensure that members are provided with responses to those questions. Right. So I'll now move on to the first agenda item, which is the internal audit report. So I'll ask Lucy to introduce that.
Thank you, Chair. Unusually short report for us this evening. You've got one final report in your pack tonight, which is a follow-up report to the recharging mechanisms audit. So this is an update to the report we brought it to the October meeting. And you can see, I think if I record, 2 of the actions have been completed, 4 are in progress and 2 still need to be started, but I believe there's good progress being made in that area. We continue to follow up all the agreed actions, and you've currently got 14 open agreed actions. And you have a copy of that report in your pack, so happy to take any questions. The only other thing I would add is if there are any areas to include in an audit plan going forward for next year that you think might want inclusion, please just drop me an email or give me a ring and we can add it in for consideration. But happy to take any questions on the report.
Any questions from the floor? Councillor Day.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Lucy, it's really following up on a discussion we had at the October meeting about the categorisation of the open issues to do with recharges monitoring and recharges reconciliations. And I'm happy to be persuaded on this one, but for me, I think those should be priority 1 rather than 2. I think that 2 kind of is downplaying their importance in the process, because for me, as I said last time, they're detective controls that, when operating effectively, will give assurance over the process as a whole, including all, a lot of the individual controls that in there, as long as the control is you do the reconciliation or you monitor and follow up, any reconciling items or any discrepancies. And I just, so personally, I would prefer to see those changed to priority 1 rather than priority 2, but I just appreciate your take on it. Sorry, recharges. So on the open agreed actions, it's, my eyesight's terrible. 6814 in the first column, ID action, and 6823, just to help find them.
I think what might be easier for purposes of tonight, if I can do another written response to you as a committee, I can see what the reasoning was for giving those two as priority twos rather than a priority one, and then let the whole committee know at the same time, rather than you wait for me to load the system up and find out what the reasoning was for that. But I will promise I'll do that this week, and I won't leave it so long this time.
So for me, whether it's 2 or 1, it's about seeing progress, isn't it? Really, that's the key. When's our next meeting, Judith? Yeah, after that. So that's really when we'd hope to see. We're past the deadline then, and we hope to see that we've made a lot of progress.
Yeah, I'd expect to see all of those gone off the list by that time, Chair, because as you quite rightly say, the target timescale now is 31st of March for all the recharge agreed actions.
The priority. I mean, no, happy to review that, but if we've actually achieved it in the next few weeks, well, please, Claire, yeah.
Something. I think just from my perspective, what I would say is this has been quite a challenging one for officers, because the audit was essentially auditing something that wasn't in existence. So the recharging mechanism process didn't exist prior to this audit. So we've taken into account all of the recommendations. All of the systems and that are now in their final stages of testing, and I'm confident, based on the update I've had today, that this will all be ready to go live in February. So I think in terms of the priority, I totally agree. I think moving forward, if we were in this position next year, I would absolutely expect it to be a priority one, because it will be a really important part of a process. But at the moment, it's part of a process that kind of doesn't exist, if that makes sense, which is why I suspect it got a priority 2 as opposed to a priority 1, although I'm not the auditor, so I don't know. So I think, like I said, by your next meeting, I would expect these to have all been closed off as well, because I'm confident that by the end of February, at the absolute latest, this will all be working properly in the new system that's been built. So I think that's what my take on it would be, but it'd be useful for Lucy to come back and confirm in terms of that priority.
Go back to that, Lucy, or respond?
It'll be my email, Chair.
Yeah, this is a comment, not a question, actually. So it's not directed at Lucy, but over the stuff we were really talking about last time, it's in the issues log, non-compliance with Section 20 notice process. I mean, I'm just really surprised that I would have thought, for a social housing organisation for Cheltenham Borough Homes, sending out compliance Section 20 notices. I mean, that is, I would just assume that it's just so fundamental to what that is about, that they would be right, that they would be compliant, and that the auditors found some that were seemingly non-compliant is just a great surprise to me, because it's just so core to the operation of that kind of entity. So it's not a question, it's just a comment from a member of the audit committee. If I assume that Claire's perhaps the best place, I don't know.
Matt.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to add in with regard to the Section 20 consultation process, you're quite right. It is a process you've got to move through, where you've got to serve notices at various stages. Where it gets complex is the scope of the works that are involved. So these are quite often huge projects. So the actual case that we looked at was to do with neighbourhood works in a block of flats. So the original notices were served, which outline the scope of the works. The Section 20 notices are worded sometimes appropriately, because sometimes, I don't know, if you're replacing a new roof, you don't know the full extent of the works so there's always a contingency. So there's legal wordings around there could be additional costs. with the case in question that we actually identified, we'd done neighbourhood works, but at some point, one of our colleagues wanted to add in additional works into that contract. So that was actually spotted by colleagues. So we quite rightfully said, you can't include that in the scope of works because that wasn't in your original notice of intention. So it came through as a complaint, which we dealt with, and we didn't charge because we said we haven't followed the legal framework. So that was just to give a context. It was one section 20 in one block of flats. We deal with loads of section 20s and stuff. So to be fair, just to put it in perspective, it was actually one particular case, which isn't great. You'll see from the action points, because section 20 involves a number of teams. It involves our technical investment team who deal with the contractors and arrange the works. And then you have my leasehold management team that has to make sure that the notices have enough information on them for leaseholders. We look at it as if we were the leaseholders receiving it. So it goes through a number of teams. On this occasion, the leasehold management team wasn't notified of the additional works. When we spotted it, we said, well, we weren't compliant, so we're not going to charge for this. What we've introduced already is that there's delegated authority where it now goes. We mentioned in the comments now we have an operations manager who oversees all of these large contracts. They have to sign off the original scope of works. That's all recorded. That goes to my team. So everything now has to get signed off at every stage so that we can't get any reoccurrences effectively. It's not as perfect as I'd like it because it is a little bit manual. But again, in the commentary, we're already exploring our housing management system that has a section 20 module, which will hopefully make things more watertight. But yeah, these are significant works, significant costs to leaseholders. So this was, to my knowledge, one occurrence. The other ones that were looked at, we've been fully compliant with. So, but yeah, you're quite right to make that comment. So I hope that's helped to give it some context.
Thanks very much, Matt. Anything else, Councillor Day? Okay, excellent. So I think if there's nothing else from the floor, the question now is to invite members to approve the recommendation, which is to note the report. Yeah. Okay. If I could see a show of hands on that, that would be excellent. Thank you very much. Name gone. So we can now move on to the annual governance statement action plan update. That's quite a title. Claire.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, members, or you'll all be familiar that every year we go through an assurance process, and that culminates in the creation of the annual governance statement, which looks back at our governance arrangements over the past year and identifies themes or actions for us to think about in the year ahead. So the annual governance statement for last financial year identified kind of 4 activities for this financial year, so the one we're operating in now, and they were around safeguarding, so updating our kind of safeguarding policy and rolling out some training to staff and members. There'd been an outstanding action from the value for money review completed by our external auditors, recommending that we create something called a partnership register. So that was an action. There was some work around updating the way we do our commissioned services assurance. So we'd commissioned local partnerships to do a bit of a review of the way that we seek assurance around some of our services that we buy in. So swap, for example, or services we buy in from Publica, services we buy in from One Legal, how we kind of make sure we get that assurance. And then the 4th one was around that continuing to build on our journey around housing compliance. So those were the kind of 4 themes. I've included a little table in the pack that tells you sort of what the specific action is and where we are in terms of the progress against those. They're very nearly there. So action 3 and 4 have all been completed. Action 1, the safeguarding policy is now completed and was approved in November. And we're just in the process now of rolling out the training. So some of the staff have already started. We just need to think about the member side of it, which we'll be doing with the member development panel. And the partnership register, again, that's really well advanced now. So we created a template to collect all of the data that we needed. Those have been coming back in thick and fast over the last few days. So people have got a few more days. And then we'll pull all that together in a central register, which we can then share with external audit as part of the value for money review. And of course, more than happy to share that with members of this committee if you would find that useful, because it does contain useful information about what our partnerships are, some of the risks around those, how we kind of have information sharing and all of that kind of thing. So happy to share that with members via email as opposed to part of a formal meeting, but happy to share that if anyone would be interested in seeing it when it's complete. But I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks very much, Claire. So it's really about Appendix 2 and whether you're happy with the progress to date. Councillor William.
Sorry, I'm a bit with cold. So in terms of progress, I'm happy. But I think certainly in the safeguarding realm, there is more that we could do. Having looked at the safeguarding policy, and one of the bits of the council I'm more familiar with, there's a paragraph about licensing which says the council has a wide range of powers and discretion to refuse, revoke or suspend licences where, for example, safeguarding concerns arise. More proactively, we impose mandatory safeguarding training regime for taxi and private hire licence holders. It was mentioned, but at the time when we last looked at the Licensing Act 2003 policy, but it doesn't seem to have got in there. We don't seem to have learnt the lessons from the Rotherham child abuse scandal, in the sense of, if you look at the Mirror, there's a Mirror headline which says teenage girls were groomed with McDonald's burgers and drugs and raped by gangs of men. Not a pleasant headline that you want to read. We don't license most fast food premises until they become late night refreshment licenses, and I think we've missed a trick by requiring late night refreshment, those working in late night refreshment, as part of their mandatory licensing conditions that we are entitled to put on there, that their staff are given annual or every 3 years some reasonable amount of licensing, of safeguarding training, because people working in hospitality, under a license that we issue, we could make them do that safeguarding training. The safeguarding training with taxis has been shown to have protected children from child sexual exploitation, because taxi drivers have gone, why are you going to meet this man at this railway station? And then they've done the safeguarding thing. The same thing should apply to those sorts of settings like fast food restaurants. And I think it's unfortunate that somewhere in the whole set of processes, it didn't make it into our latest Licensing Act 2003 policy. So it isn't really a criticism of us, it's just trying to work out how we get this into the process. But I suspect the next review of the Licensing Act 2003 will be after local government reorganisation, and I don't know how we make sure that the safeguarding policies get into there, but good luck with merging 6 councils' Licensing Act 2003 policies. That's all I'll say. But I'm happy. I just think we need to look and make sure that we learn lessons from elsewhere. So, thank you.
Do you want to insert something in the update column, or do you think it's probably? I mean, I take the point you made. I'm struggling to think what exactly we put in that, but I'm open to offers.
I appreciate the challenge, because ultimately it really should be for this to go into the policy at the consultation stage at the next time, unless we want to specifically go, we should add this as a general condition. But if we don't, applicants will push back and they won't then do it. It's a difficult one to work out the best place to put it in. I just think it ought to be captured in the hope that when these policies are reviewed, we try and learn the lessons that have gone there. It isn't really for this committee. It's quite a challenge. That's why I flagged it, because ultimately it needs to go up to come back down and end up in the right places.
So I think perhaps what we can do is when we do this year's annual governance statement, we'll obviously be putting some context in there around what we've done in terms of improving safeguarding this year, because that was one of our themes. But we can capture a few words or a couple of sentences in there around that point that you've just raised about, but this is something that's ever evolving. We need to continue to learn lessons and et cetera, et cetera. And we can specifically mention the licensing stuff in there as well. I think that will probably be the best way to do it.
I just wanted to kind of recognise the progress that's been made on housing compliance, actually. So as chair of the Cabinet Housing Committee, I think I quite publicly said at some stage that I wasn't very happy with how things are, but significantly due to Claire, and she must take massive credit for this, significant progress has been made. And here we're talking about the compliance strategy and the documentation and so on. In a way, that's the tail wagging the dog. The dog is actually complying, and very soon we will be audited, won't we? And I will have a mock interview next week, and as will all of us, and I am much, much, much more confident than I was a year ago. I think massive progress has been made. We're not complacent, of course we're not, but yeah, thank you, and thank you to Claire.
Yeah, that was it. Thanks for that, Julian. Obviously, those are exactly my thoughts on that very subject, and specifically that you can't move to compliance until you know what you're going to be complying with. So that's the next phase, and you mentioned it in here. So hopefully that wording works for me anyway. Thanks. Don't switch the mic off, Adrian. So if there's no other comments from the floor, what we need to do there is to approve the recommendation, which was to note. Show of hands, please. Thank you very much. Right, so the next item is the update, a review of the risk register. And Claire, it's you again.
Here's me again. Yes, so you've obviously got the report in front of you. Some new risks added since your last meeting, particularly around finance capacity, which we all know about. A couple of confidential risks that we'll pick up later under exempt business, I'm sure. And then some risks, 2 risks were closed. Again, one was a confidential risk, but the other one was around managing concurrent incidents. So this was around mostly around sort of emergency planning and whether we'd be able to manage in that situation, which is happily we're kind of feeling a bit more confident in that space now. And then there were a few sort of change in risk scores. Some again around the compliance stuff, which we've just been hearing around, and one around the big local. So that was the funding that members, I'm sure, will have talked about before, around the sort of Petersfield hub that was being built, which is now well underway, I believe, and is kind of, I think somebody told me the other day it was going to be sort of ready to let by sort of springtime. So it seems to be absolutely flying up. So so that's great. One in risk has increased since we last assessed it, which is the leisure and culture risk. Again, this is about whether we can deliver what we need to deliver in terms of our future leisure and culture services, particularly with everything that's going on around us at the moment. So I won't go into any more detail on anything, but if people have got questions, I will try my best to answer them. Although I am not the risk owner for all of them, so if I can't answer, I would take them away and provide written questions, written responses afterwards.
So just quickly from me, that on the one that's increased, the leisure and culture services, does this refer to risk 152 or 142 or possibly both?
Oh, hang on.
So the 142 is about our leisure and culture venues, and the 152 is about the trust. But you know, there's some massive medium and long term issues around, for instance, funding the track at the Prince of Wales, funding the repair works that are necessary at leisure, all of that sort of thing. So
this is more about 142, which is around the future delivery. So obviously the one about the trust is specifically around what we've got at the moment in terms of the trust model. This risk is more around what the future looks like, because obviously the arrangement with the management agreement with the trust is coming towards the end of its time. So as an organisation, we need to make a decision at some point around how we move forward with this. So, you know, in what that looks like in terms of reprocuring services and that kind of thing. But also what we've got to think about is what that looks like in the bigger picture of things like local government reorganisation and the timescales for that, because as we all know, once we get into 2027 on the current timeline, then there'll be a shadow authority, and then they would make decisions around things like procurement. So the risk is more around what the model might look like moving forward, as opposed to the trust being able to deliver what they do now. Does that make sense?
yeah. Is the risk around, it's not so much about is it the risk of Cheltenham Borough Council as an entity, or is it about the risk to the service delivery or provision?
I think it's about the risk of, well, a little bit both, because if we don't get the scope and the timeline right, we might lose control of making the decisions on what that might look like. But also, again, if we don't start the work, there is a risk that it kind of falls through the net, and then when it goes into
subsequent council.
who knows whether it'll be a priority for a new council. So it's a little bit of both. That's a really weird answer,
I think
unclear answer, sorry.
that's exactly how I thought you'd probably respond. It does seem to me that something, I'm very pleased to see that it's been increased, because it clearly is a worry. Have any comments from the floor on that?
More a comment on a different risk. Risk 158, local government reorganisation. Again, I wonder whether this is in the right place. I mean, it's talking about how it's managed, and the financial viability, the staff retention. I think that the worry I have with some of this is, whatever solution the government come up with, and I'm not convinced, firstly, I'm not convinced their solution will be the right thing for the people of Gloucestershire, and I'm not sure that the people of Gloucestershire or the people of Cheltenham will even be asked. And I don't know how, so there's quite a risk it won't be what the people want anyway, and it will be forced on us. But whatever we get, you will have 7 organisations with all of those structures and all of those partnerships and all of those senior staff being forced into 1 or 2 organisations where there are only three of those senior roles, possibly some other statutory roles that would be merged from the county council, which does mean that retention or recruitment could be really, really challenging, because if you are someone who has career prospects elsewhere, and you find another authority that's already gone through this or isn't going through this, why would you stay? And that doesn't just affect Cheltenham, that affects all of the Gloucestershire councils, because would you want job certainty, or would you want the risk of having a competition for your job with 6 other people potentially? So there's that problem at the top, and those are really, really important positions, i.e. we are required to have them by law. There's also all of the shared services that could be merged and how that works. And I think I'm also worried that in terms of capturing things like services to residents, it isn't necessarily about the services. It's also about how do you merge the policies of 6 different councils, because you have so many different things that would need to be brought in potentially from day one, some of which are likely to be extremely contentious, good luck with the Gloucestershire or whatever we are split into. But I would love, I wouldn't want to be a fly on the wall, or it would make interesting watching for things like the sex establishment licensing policy, because our policy is very well developed. It's been through the process many times. Many of the other councils haven't got this sort of thing. And given some of the activities that should be licensed but weren't in Forest of Dean, I believe. I'm not going to go into details. I'll spare you that for later. But it could well be really complicated. And that's just one policy. You think about trying to merge the gambling policies, the licensing act policies, planning enforcement, all of these sorts of things. And going through this in my head, we think it's going to happen, and the impact could well be a lot higher than it is. So I wonder if this really should be higher in there. As you know, we've probably got to untangle ourselves from some of the partnerships we've got with West Oxford District Council as well. So there isn't just the entanglement that we have with the other 6 Gloucestershire authorities. There's also the shared services with West Oxfordshire and how that works, and so on and so forth. So I wonder if it is in the right place. And it probably is all-consuming for officers as well. So apologies.
Well, that gives me an excellent opportunity to reflect on an email we had from our independent member, who unfortunately can't be with us tonight, who has been through a similar process and feels that we probably don't know quite how destabilising that is, and how long it actually takes to, well, recover. However well it goes, however well it might look in the end or not, just going through the process will inevitably create this hiatus. Now, quite how you reflect that in risk terms on a risk register, I'll leave to Claire. But
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's a massively, you could almost, so let's just go back a step. LGR has got it's got its own risk register across Gloucestershire that looks at all those individual risks, so down to that level of detail. So thinking about things that Doug was raising, for example, about data and all that kind of stuff, those risks are there. Councillor Willingham's absolutely right. I mean, this is massive, and trying to capture it in a risk is really challenging. But what I think I'll take from this evening is to take it away and pick up with Gareth a bit. Maybe we look at that scoring again, because it's hard to judge what the impact's going to be and the probability, but we can definitely go and have another look at it.
Councillor Took.
I've got multiple hats, and actually I see M5 Junction 10, and with my other hat on as the cabinet member for planning and infrastructure for GCC, I have to challenge that slightly. And I challenge that for 2 reasons. One, I question whether it should still be there as a risk, because GCC got the funding through from Homes England last week, and we sorted out funding with Cheltenham Borough Council, Tewkesbury Borough Council and Gloucester City Council as well via cell contributions, which were very welcome. So we sorted that. Secondly, the question of Section 106 contributions, if you don't get it right, it has lots of different risks. So from a Cheltenham Borough Council point of view, we may speak about the council's 5-year housing supply. But from the point of view of the citizens of Cheltenham, who really don't care which council does what, they will also be worried about whether they get schools, whether they get roads, whether they get leisure centres, whether they get libraries. And all those things are paid for by Section 106 contributions. So there is a risk in not agreeing Section 106 contributions, but the risk is much broader and should be framed differently. than it is put in here. So first of all, I would take away the M5 junction 10 point, but I would also not just talk about the risk in terms of developers saying they can't afford to do affordable housing. I would talk about the risk in terms of how do we pay for our hospitals? How do we pay for our schools? How do we pay for our roads? How do we pay for our libraries?
Well, yes, I'd rather more succinct. I just put a question mark in the margin here, saying decrease now in terms of the risk. But yes, perhaps even just eliminate in terms of junction 10.
Yeah, so again, I can take that one back because obviously this report was ran before the junction 10 position changed. Obviously, you can see in there it's not been updated for quite a while. So I can get Tracy to have a review of that risk. And I think the point you make about the sort of broader one, section 106, is a good one. So I can pick that up with Tracy. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments from the floor about this register? We don't require a vote on this, so I think I can move on. Moving on to the work programme. Has anybody got any concerns about the revised work programme that you see on page 34?
It's just a question that you may know the answer to, Chair. Is the 23rd of Feb meeting, will we be approving the accounts at that meeting? Is the audit on track?
I don't know the answer to that. Well, we probably should have asked Adele earlier, shouldn't we? Yeah. I suspect not, but I don't know for sure one way or the other. Maybe Cliff.
Well, caveat this with I've been out of the business for a week, so things may have changed. But I would say it's highly unlikely. I think what you will be looking at is more around the value for money review part of the work that they have managed to progress and to get an update. The idea of having it before the end of the month was so that you could at least have an update as a committee before the backstop date. But I think it's highly unlikely you'll be approving the accounts.
Well, it would be a very pleasant surprise for her, but not expected. Not expected. So that obviously kicks it back to the 22nd of April. That's our subsequent meeting, is it? And that's quite a big agenda. Well, it may change as time goes on, I suspect. But other than that, are members happy with the work plan as presented? Seeing the nodding of heads, I'll go for a yes on that. No vote required on that one. Any other item the chairman determines to be urgent or requires a decision? There are none. The dates of the next two meetings we've just discussed. So I can declare the open meeting now closed. Thank you. Sorry, we have to vote to go into exempt
Yes, you need
section.
to
Sorry.
read the bit out that says
Oh,
there should be some wording for you to read out, Chair. In accordance with section
oh my God.
12.
There we are. I've got it.
Sorry, Chair.
Right. Are you ready, committee? No more laughing in the ranks. The committee is recommending to approve the following resolution: that in accordance with section 100A, brackets 4, close brackets, Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the remaining agenda items, as it's likely that, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted, the nature of the proceedings, if members of the public are present, there will be disclosed to them exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3 and 7, part 1, schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, namely paragraph 3, information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, brackets including the authority holding that information. Paragraph 7, information relating to any action taken or to be taken in connection with the prevention, investigation or prosecution of crime. So could I see by a show of hands if you're happy to move into exempt session. Thank you very much.